Welcome, everyone, and I'm delighted to speak today with Russell, who will lead a track at the upcoming OPA retreat in Zion National Park next April. It's it promises to be really an amazing event in the middle of these majestic mountains, and we're excited to have you, Russell. I know you've done a lot of research on the history of astrology, and you call your track the sacred science. And we know that your work involves a lot of the fusion between science and spirituality, which is exactly the theme of our conference. And so I'm just going to read briefly, the steps that you're going to go through the language of geometry, mathematics, both science and spirituality are described, defined, and understood, just as the information age in the last half century has required rapidly evolving advancement to meet the demand of, of more complexity. This new impulse of the spiritual energetic age is requiring an upgrade and reintegration of our core system for the same reason. And people can read the full explanation, but you're going to go through where we've been between science and astrology, know thyself, why learn astrology, the inner alchemy of people and planet, the illusion of separation of wisdom and knowledge, harmony, aspects, remedy, the soul path, the return of sacred science to the modern world. And sounds great and very compelling. So tell us more. What inspires you to go, to choose that track, and how can people personalize this?
Thanks, Maurice. Yes, the primary theme of this track, I think, really speaks to broadening everyone's perspective on what astrology actually is. So I've always viewed astrology as the underlying language for all other things. Since I came to know astrology for what it really is, you can see it anything and anywhere, and getting to know that everything around you is part of your process is what the ancients were getting at when they were talking about know thyself. And I think that bringing that back to the core is really my mission on the planet, and this is the perfect conference to show some of these ideas.
So when you speak of the ancients, what time frame, what culture are you more specific, or are you speaking about all indigenous cultures?
Well, I think all indigenous cultures had a pretty good grasp and used the world around them to ascribe planetary correspondence to plants and things on Earth, and how that they worked with them. That was a form of astro-alchemy. I think at the highest level of the ancients, what I see is the period of Egypt. Egypt had the most refined alchemical astrological discourses happening on the planet, I think, in any recordable history. If we go back to that, we can see what they were trying to get at, that all of this was one divine science in which we're practicing everything around us, and that the more that we can show that sacredness, the better off your civilization is going to be. So I think as long as we're doing this work with spirituality, and we're doing this work on scientific research and study, and we combine these two things, we will return our civilization, our societies, back to a social holistic norm. But we're working in sync with nature. All these problems that we've created, these afflictions around us, will be solved the more that we can think about the world as astrology and ourselves personally doing the work of astrology. Doing some of that, I think, is, and outside of the typical astrological reading, is what I've been focusing on the last hand. how can I make some of this information tangible and practical to those who want to take this track? And a lot of ways to do that are areas of astrology that are least well studied. One of the things I'm going to do is work with the biological salts, the Schussler salts, that show if you work with some deficiencies.
Can you repeat that, to work with? Because we cannot hear you very clearly, and it seems, you know, can you repeat the last sentence?
Yeah, so working with, it's called Schussler's salt. Dr. Schussler in the late 1800s developed an astrological correspondence with salt that he calls the salt of salvation. And some astrologers are aware of this, but really taking that into our practice and utilizing the minerals, the herbs around us, and I use the salt to show this very easily. And we can work with our clients that way too. This is a way to begin to show the alchemical synthesis of energy around us and how to work with it a little bit. So that's more or less what I'm going to be working with.
And I'm showing these images of, like you say, natural formations of sacred geometry all around us, basically, especially in flowers in the natural world. And you know, the great thing is that we're going to learn all this, and we're actually going to be able to hear you well when we are in the same classroom as you.
Yes.
So
one of the things that I also found with working with alchemy is being in the same space. You are creating the alchemical vessel in the classroom with the students. The energy you work with, you can imbibe information and pass on the passion directly through the energetic field, just like nature does.
Beautiful. And that's what we're looking forward to. So people will bring their own charts. How will that work practically?
We're going to use those for the analysis of the salts that are primary in your chart and those salts that you're deficient with in your chart. There's methods on ways to do that so that you can see what astrological salts that I'm deficient in calcium fluoride, I believe it is. So it's like I regularly take that extra because it's shown to be deficient in my astrological chart. It's very simple. It's like a prescription for the stars. So I think people really should begin to use this. Something very easy to use if you know what you're doing and if you're an astrologer.
Interesting. And I'm just showing some photos here of, we're going to talk about day 4 as well, but I want to show photos also of the location. You talk about an alchemical connection as you come together, and I think the middle of the swimming pool may be a great spot.
Oh yeah. Shake it up in the swimming pool.
So this is, you know, some of the images will be nested really in the mountains and really enjoying the energy of this sacred place. So talking about your track, people can find out more online. Just go to the opaastrology.org website, go to events and see the schedule, see the tracks. And the great thing is, you know, the sooner you sign up, you will have a better price, obviously, and you can also have the track of your choice because these tracks are selling and some of them are selling out soon. Now, I'm showing this slide, which is about the last day. We have a panel about all kinds of arguments made against astrology. And as I was talking with Chris McRae on another video, part of the reason we're doing this is not so much to convince people that astrology is wonderful and working, but it's for our own critical thinking and astrologers to use criticism to improve themselves, to be, you know, to know better what they're doing. So it's basically using the adversities to our own advantage. And you're going to speak about the codex of the cosmos, consciousness and matter. And how does that tie into the criticism?
Well, you know, what I started to read this. I'm going to go ahead and read this real quick. It ties into the criticism because the reason the pattern in the stars is repeated in the patterns of your life is because there is only one pattern to begin with. And Terence McKenna, philosopher, New Age philosopher, said that he was regarding astrology. And I think we have to remember that there's only one simple energetic pattern flowing and functioning at all scalar levels of the universe. It doesn't matter if it's the first energy that creates subatomic particles or if it's the energy that creates planetary particles. It's all the same pattern. And once you know that simple pattern, you understand that it functions inside of both the spiritual imprints of our lives and in the material evidence of the world. And showing that has been my greatest joy on the planet, I think, is to really show that there is an underlying mathematical codex that you cannot argue with. Once you begin to understand and bridge these two languages between science and spirit, that we're talking about the same thing. And eventually we will come back to having that dialogue as one, that this mathematical universe is not devoid of spirituality. So that, you know, I think that we have to speak their language and they have to speak ours. And as soon as that happens, we won't be having these arguments anymore against astrology.
So you're basically proposing some evidence or a theory about the mathematical continuum that brings both spirituality and science together.
Yeah, I'm talking, well, I may sound high-minded, but I am talking about what appears to me to be scientific evidences that what we have long known with spiritual concepts are easily reinforced by what science has studied about. You know, recently I was working with the fetus, and how the fetus develops and how it grows from a single cell to a nodal cord, and how you can see this in an astrological pattern. And they have already explained how this development happens. And it's amazing that we have the background of how a fetus develops, and we can see how we can explain that development through an unfolding of astrological patterns. So I call that evidence to me. It takes other people it needs to be peer reviewed, I suppose. But you know, I come from the point of view that everything is revealing this astrological divine pattern. It's just we just need to look at it that way.
Okay, that's great. So seeing basically the 12 archetypes in every phase of life. You talk about the fetus. So seeing how the fetus development go through these stages of astrology themes, is that what you're referring to?
Exactly. Yeah. The fetus of any organic creature, you know, that it creates a simple pattern that we can identify immediately as a zodiacal field, and it begins to evolve in a way that describes the mathematical evolvement of the zodiac itself and harmonies and frequencies. So just taking a few concepts over here that we already know, and a few over here that science is proving, and putting this together and embracing that as a holistic knowledge is where we need to go with this. But I think it's undeniable that if you come at it from that integrated point of view already, it makes this a fascinating world to look at, that there is no separation between these two things. We are living in a spiritual matter matrix, and we're here to explore it and understand it.
And I assume there are going to be many compelling slides that you're going to prepare to guide us through this process.
Yes, I've got evidences that I've got lots of photographic evidence and a lot of hard evidence that's been empirically, rigorously peer reviewed, and that if you apply this other lens, as astrologers, we already know these things. All we have to do is look at you. I don't even have to do explanations sometimes. when it's presented a certain way, other people can extrapolate what we're getting at, that there is a truth here that is undeniable. So yes, giving some hints of some seeds of knowledge and letting everyone else see what it's about, letting it spring in their mind. I think is something we're going to do in this track.
I think your presentations, could not fit our themes better. So we're very happy to have you on board. Thank you for taking the time to come to Zion and enlighten us. I'm sure there's going to be a wonderful exchange. So everybody, if you're more curious about Russell's work, you can look at the OPA website. Is there another reference, Russell, that
I'm mainly active on social media, so hit me up on Facebook, and that's the best way to interact with me. And I post stuff from there time to time.
And you're leading a couple of pages on Facebook. One of them is about historical monuments.
Yes, the Zodiac Image Project. We capture art and architecture, anywhere that we've seen zodiacs in culture and society, because astrology is all around us, and we just got to open our eyes and look. So I like to show people, like, hey, like that is a famous Paul Manship zodiac that's a lot of people don't know about it, and I wanted people to see astrology's revered everywhere.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So you can check Russell's page, Zodiac Image Project. Check it out on Facebook. And we'll be in touch, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Russell.
Thanks, Maurice. Have a great day, guys. All right.